What's your name and where do you live? How many minutes, near enough, does it take you to attend the Autism Monthly Social Club drop-in? And how many miles away is your home from the Tameside Autism Group venue?
I'm Richard Finch, and I live at Roaches, Mosley, which is halfway between Mosley and Greenfield. During the day there's a very handy bus, the 2:20 for Hyde, but it takes it at least 40 minutes to get here, and I have to make sure I get the 5:27 back because there isn't another one. So it's reasonably handy to get here, even if it takes rather a long time.
Okay. How has having autistic characteristics or Asperger's issues helped with job situations? And how have you known workplace problems and difficulties? And how has the autistic and Asperger's issues helped and taken care of work issues?
Well, I didn't know I had anything like this until long after I'd started work. And at the time I was simply working part-time with my sister in a shop and part-time actually driving a bus. Looking back, I realised where the problems lie. You have no idea how to cope with an interview. And the biggest problem I see today is everything except very small concerns has a personnel officer, or I think it's called human resources, which doesn't make much sense to me. And once you come up against those people, you're finished, because they know how to deal with people, but at an interview for a job, you're expecting to be asked mainly about the job. And usually these people know very little about the actual technicalities of the job. So the interviews that have been successful have been rather odd interviews, to say the least. They've been interviews where the little concern I've gone to has got in a mess with a problem, and they were really using the interview candidates to find out which was going to be the best at sorting out this mess. They weren't conventional interviews at all. A conventional interview I don't think I could cope with. Most people who have Asperger's syndrome probably couldn't.
What I was going to say was, when you went for the kind of asking questions interview and the employer was asking you how to solve a problem, did you actually get the job when you said how you could solve the problem? Did you get the job at the final bit of the interview?
We were never told. The one which clearly was a case of a problem was when I went for a job as a demonstrator, horticultural demonstrator with Askham Bryan Agricultural College near York. And as the interview progressed, I began to sense that there was a problem with the equipment that they were using to demonstrate plant propagation to the students. But I only sensed that after I'd been asked some very searching questions about plant production and plant propagation, and I'd already had experience of doing this for many years, and also experience of actually making the equipment for plant propagation. Well, that transpired later was their main problem. Their equipment didn't do the job properly, and because I knew how to make this equipment, I ended up doing the job.
And did you actually, that job whereby you had like a pre-conversation during the job interview, and you gained greater awareness about how the issues could be addressed and how the issues could be repaired? Did you actually get the job at that interview?
Oh, I didn't know about whether I would get the job at that interview. They wrote to me later.
What recommendations could you give in order to prevent bullying at school or workplace could be established for the future? What ideas and what kind of plans could people put into place in various situations if somebody's getting bullied at school, or like in the workplace, or in various situations?
I'm not really sure, because apart from teasing at school, and I'm afraid I did it as well sometimes in return, I didn't greatly notice anything. But it's possibly because the grammar school was going so fast, and you were so bothered about trying to understand things and flitting from one class to another. quite honestly, there wasn't time for bullying. And there were also different clubs after school, and the people who went to those all had the same sort of interests, so they didn't bully. I didn't really notice it. Mind you, I'm talking about a period which is late 50s, early 60s, so it's a very different period from today, when a lot of the children, myself included, had no access to a television set because we simply didn't have one. There were no quick communications at all other than by reading a paper. So making anything organised for bullying or gangs was more or less impossible, even if the pupils had any inclination to do so. We tended to taught the teachers more, if anything, but then the teachers taught in a way which was sometimes rather too fast. The main problem was there wasn't enough time to inquire if you didn't understand something.
What I was going to say is with regard to like somebody who's got autism or Asperger's, watching the film track made by the National Autistic Society on bullying issues at school or bullying issues in the workplace, if somebody's got autism or Asperger's, their kind of communication kind of level, how they speak to people, is not the same as somebody without autism or Asperger's. They don't communicate on the same wavelength for some reason. And how could that be better maintained? How could, for example, somebody with autism or Asperger's or autism connect with somebody without that condition and then not be prone to saying the wrong thing?
I don't really know. That's the problem. Wouldn't be in a mess if I knew. If the film, I have not seen the film, it depends how well it's made, it would give people with autism some idea of how not to do something, but it might not teach them how actually to do something. It's just so difficult to understand something like that. Looking back, I can see now where things went wrong, but it's only in hindsight, and you realise perhaps anything from half an hour to 10 years later that where you actually went wrong. And it's because an autistic person appears under some circumstances to put off a non-autistic person in some strange way. I don't know how it happens, but this is my impression. But if people can learn how they put off normal people and try to avoid that behaviour, it would certainly help. Otherwise, I can't really give any recommendations.
That's a very good answer. I think it could be the issue of having greater understanding, realising that the reason why somebody talks in a certain way, and then realising that, and perhaps having greater education awareness of saying, look, this individual's got autism or Asperger's, they're perhaps not on the same wavelength as somebody without autism or Asperger's. So what I was going to ask as well, how is autism or Asperger's issues a talent for employers and the work environment?
It's a talent in a technical situation, technical working. A lot of people with Asperger's syndrome have a fairly high IQ. I know mine is very high, but the trouble is it's a high IQ. It's a very poor emotional quotient or EQ. And people get on better if the two are a bit closer together. But they often have a great skill in one particular fairly narrow field. Now mine is not a regular one, it's horticulture and particularly plant production and plant propagation. I seem to be able to look at the plants, take the cuttings at the right time, get them to root and produce new plants, sometimes of things which are extremely difficult to grow. And I just seem to have a natural talent for telling when the plant is ripe, how to cut it, where to cut it, when, and how to grow it. And I don't know how that has occurred, but I ended up in doing a job like that, and I was recommended for this sort of a job. And I did it well. but I had no technical qualifications. My mistake was to leave that job to get technical qualifications, which I now have, a higher national diploma in commercial horticulture. But I've never managed to get back into the original job. I might have the letters after my name now, but it was a terrible mistake ever to leave that original job. Now, it was just luck I got into it. But if somebody who has Asperger's syndrome manages to get into their ideal job, where their skills put them head and shoulders above everybody else, then I think the main thing I can recommend is don't be tempted by greener grass somewhere else. Stay in that one thing, because to find another job, you have to go through interviews. And while you might be wonderful at your job, you're probably utterly useless at an interview. So you may leave a job and never get another one, or never get another one that's anywhere near comparable to the job you left.
That's a key valid point. Do you think in some way that people with autism or Asperger's could have characteristics of being workaholics and put a lot of hours and a lot of commitment into a workplace environment, or do you think people with Asperger's or autism are kind of like laid back and not determined enough in the workplace?
More likely they'll put too much work into it and wear themselves out. I'm afraid that's tended to happen to me on the job I ended up doing on an estate in Hampshire. It was estate work. I mean, I've been back there recently working, and more or less on my own. I'm supposed to be retired, and it was just because I like doing the horticultural work, but there's far more than one person can tackle. So you tend to end up half killing yourself trying to struggle with trees and branches which were too heavy, or loading too much on, or you're not actually doing the horticultural work. You end up repairing machines and all sorts of things which are probably ancillary to the average estate, but you want to get back to the growing. So it's frustrating, as well as physically very exhausting and technically quite hard work as well.
Well, I can see the key points there. What I'm saying as well is it in some way, if somebody's like got these characteristics, there should be time to subconsciously kind of realise it's time for chilling and relaxing and stepping away from the work, however still putting the hours into the commitment and still doing an amazing job. So did you realise when you was like a workaholic in these situations, did you realise that you needed time for yourself and time to chill?
Yes, you do, but the problem is, unless you're offered this time automatically, you don't have the social skills to ask for it. So you carry on working. I mean, the people with Asperger's syndrome, they tend to work more hours than they're paid for, especially if it's a rather unstructured workplace. And they don't have the skills to say, I really need some time off, how can I arrange this? Because you have to go to somebody and ask, and that's difficult.
Well, that in some ways is like a tragedy, because it means that the individual is putting a lot of commitment, a lot of hours and a lot of talent, a lot of learning, educated knowledge into the work task, and however he's having little time for themselves in order to chill and relax and step away from work, whether they need to step away from that incredible amount of work tasks to be completed. So I think that's another key valid point, having time to separate from that work commitment, to time for individual chill time, compared to having the issues that drives the individual to put that many hours in to do the work. What I'd like to ask as well is do you think issues of naivety with autism or Asperger's need to be taken awareness of, and how has financial issues been collapsed and damaging, whereby you've been ripped off or been conned? How did that situation occur with the issues that you spoke about earlier on?
I wasn't ripped off financially at work, but they're the same learning difficulties that all the rest of us have. We've got great skills in some fields and no skills in other fields. And while I might be in a scientific job in a way, I'm almost non-numerate when it comes to mathematics. I can do adding and subtracting, and it got as far as about age 11. It's never proceeded any further, so I struggle with the bank account. I wouldn't dare use a credit card. I get confused with payments in and payments out. I tend to deal all the time in cash. I was left a fair amount because my family are all dead now. And you have to put it in the hands of somebody else to sort out for you. And it's pot luck. I got ripped off doing that. In fact, the person to whom I entrusted the money, which was a registered financial advisor incidentally, ended up in jail, and I'm still trying to get the money back. But I don't know how to go about it properly because it's just so confusing. Maybe some people are seduced by a lot of credit. I never have been. In fact, I will not use credit under any circumstances. Had I not been left enough to buy a little house, I'm not sure what I would do. Probably I would have carried on all my life in the tied cottages that go with horticulture.
What I was going to say was, how did the individual manage to cheat you out of that money and take your money off you? How did that occur? How did you contact this individual and what occurred in that situation?
Well, it's extremely complicated, but financial advisors simply advertise themselves. And I went along because I simply didn't understand how to work out income tax, where to put the money I'd been left, or anything like that. I don't understand how a bank operates, even though my father was actually a manager of a bank. You see, the money's all, electronic. Unless money's in actual coins and notes, I don't tend to register how much it's actually worth. It's just pot luck whether you choose somebody who's honest or not. Even though they're registered, they can end up crooked, as I've discovered, because I didn't realise that the Financial Services Authority actually employ more or less a full-time lawyer sorting out crooked financial advisors. Not just mis-selling, actual fraud and theft.
So did you actually give this individual, this financial advisor, access to your bank account?
He could never, you to have money invested, you have to take it out of your bank account, and he puts it into some sort of investment.
Was there any pre-awareness about what was said to you before that occurred?
Well, there was, but if you don't understand finances and all the abstract things that go with it, it's extremely difficult to understand it. You're always being told, read the small print. Well, you might read it 50 times. It makes no more difference at all. It makes no difference because however many times it's explained to you even, it still is not going in. So what is the point of it?
And what was the total sum that you were deceived of and taken, ripped off for? What was the amount of money?
It's very difficult to work out. But the liquidators of the person reckon it's £36,000.
So that
No, I and the person I worked for reckon it was £36,000. The liquidators got it to more than that, but I showed the accounts to a friend who was once an auditor with Greater Manchester Transport, and he says they are fictitious. I don't see how you can have fiction is a story. I don't see how you can have a fictitious account, but maybe an auditor knows.
So was it £36,000 taken out of your bank account when you checked it?
No, it wasn't taken out of the account. It was handed over under the financial regulations to be invested.
And you got no return on it afterwards?
No.
So it's £36,000 was taken to supposedly invest, and you got
Well, more was taken to invest, but he went bankrupt, and it was because he was doing something which was non-approved that he went bankrupt. And because he was doing something non-approved, he was jailed, But the fact that he's gone bankrupt means you cannot get the rest of the money back. I got some of it back, but that much was outstanding.
That is a tragedy. The issue there is having no pre-awareness and then just naivety.
I suppose it is naivety, but how do you tell? There's no means of telling whether these places are sound. It's like taking a car to a garage. If you don't know anything about a car, you have to go on either recommendations or just take a chance. Well, I'm reasonably good trying to see to, well, at least an old car, not a new one, and I would be able to tell if the garage was much good or not simply by having a quick look round it. But a lot of people can't. But most people are supposed to be able to have this skill of working out good financial things, and they don't. I mean, if you have something wrong with your washing machine, there's something wrong with the gas boiler, there's something wrong with the car, there's something wrong with the roof, you can inquire, look around, get recommendations from neighbours, ask the local council if they have a list of recommended contractors, and have things repaired. But when it comes to finances, everybody is supposed to understand it. And it seems from the latest scandals that not even the Bank of England understand what they're doing. So how is the average person, especially someone with Asperger's syndrome, to know or understand what they're doing?
What the actual other issue would be that perhaps if you wouldn't have had Asperger's or autism, or you would have got more general kind of pre-warning, it could have been well averted, the situation.
It might have been, because you might have been able to sense you might have been able to sense that a person was not behaving honestly. But a person with Asperger's syndrome is blind to body language and other things like that, and they can't sense that they're being hurt or damaged or ripped off until it's too late.
Basically, I had the same issue about a year, two years back or so. I had a hi-fi system taken away from the flat. It was a recommendation from free cycle forums in some area nearby, because I asked about the company and they said it's got a good recommendation. I phoned them up, they took it away from the flat. It was away for 3, 4, 5 weeks or even more. They brought it back, it took 70 quid off me, near enough. And then I tried it out, it was in worse condition than what it was taken away with. So I phoned them up 2 or 3 days afterwards, took it away again, and charged me 50, 60 quid extra afterwards just to repair it twice, and brought it back and it was still in worse condition. And when I took the casing apart and had a look on the PCB board, they put a small minute SMD resistors on it, costing like half a pence, 2 or 3 SMD resistors on the PCB board that weren't even soldered properly. And that was the sum total of the repair characteristics. So why does it take like 5 or 6 weeks to put 3 or 4 SMD resistors costing half a penny each on a printed circuit board, and then, like I said, charge me that amount of money? And the repair was irresponsible, it was time consuming, it was massively expensive, and there was no way of knowing these issues afterwards until checking the PCB board.
You can't tell whether companies or whether you're going to get good help or not, except you need the social skill in a way. There are recommendations. I mean, Tameside Council have a list of recommended contractors, and you made use of a roofing contractor on their recommended list, and he's proved to be extremely good. So much so that my sister and brother-in-law, who don't live in Tameside, they live in Fallowfield, contracted him to sort out their slate roof, and he's made a very, very good job of it.
That's great,
now,
yeah.
You can sometimes get round this by having a list of recommended
which gives you
companies.
Better awareness and better system to protect you for your purchases and spending your money, so you don't get ripped off or harmed in any way by the company. So therefore, the approved traders that are genuine and honest look after the customer and it's value for money using their services?
Well, I did need my Land Rover repaired, and because the casting of the steering box, it's quite complicated, had begun to fail. The bolts were working loose, which made the steering rather dangerous, or it would have become dangerous. And fortunately, I managed to buy a new steering column, or rather a second-hand one. But I took it with me to Hampshire because I knew that in a nearby village, Nywood, there's a very, very good repairer of Land Rovers whom I've dealt with before and I could trust. Now, and they've done a very, very good job on the steering at a very good price. The car now goes where I point it, which is more than it did before. And you need to know these sort of things. Now, I could recommend that place to somebody else, but it was only feasible if they lived nearby. But if you're going to something in a subject that you know nothing about, and in finance I know nothing about it, who do you choose? I don't know. I've been very lucky with the gas service. I chose somebody out of a local Tameside publication, not one of the Tameside's recommended contractors. He's done a very, very good job indeed.
Yeah.
And now my neighbour has had him in to do some very, very major work. He's rebuilt a whole house.
Oh.
And he's very pleased with the result. In fact, he's coming again to do my boiler servicing. So he's safe. But how am I going to tell I could get ripped off, and I don't have the social skill to sort things out if I am ripped off? So I'm always very, very wary about having things done. In fact, I've learnt to do a huge amount myself because of that.
What I think the negative scenario issue is, because you experience that much, I've experienced a lot of deceiving and ripping off companies, but I'm not going to condemn every single company with the same kind of negative scenario. What I'm saying, what the issues is like, a TV area was fitted on my roof quite a number of years back, and the area was pointed actually into the roof space on the actual vertical bit, rather than be put on the chimney stack and then a mast on the chimney stack. So the TV reception was crap, basically, and the area was wrongly installed, and the area with that as well was put upside down, so water got inside the connectors and rusted the connection wires, so it didn't receive a proper signal on the TV set, as well as being pointed into the vertical bit of the roof rather than the other option of being put on the chimney stack and the aerial put the correct way around without the wires and connectors being rusted. So because the company on one occasion got a little bit verbally aggressive and then just snatched the money off the top of the table in the lounge, even though I pointed out on the TV set the picture was crap. You know what I mean? It was all speckly dots on the screen and the money was just snatched off the top of the surface, like I said, and then the contractor just stormed out of the area space in the lounge afterwards. You know what I mean? So that issue alone, training standards didn't really help out in that situation. So people with autism and Asperger's can be easily bullied and can be unaware of the situation and can be easily ripped off because of not having the confidence and the social skills and the awareness before some of these negative companies pay for their services, and it all goes wrong afterwards.
They're well aware of what's happening, unfortunately. They don't have the skill to sort out the consequences. They're all too well aware of what's happening, which adds a great deal of stress. But when it comes to things which need social skill, in other words, diplomacy, they have no skill at all. I mean, somebody with Asperger's syndrome would probably be utterly useless as an MP. They couldn't be a diplomat or anything in that line. In fact, they couldn't do anything that involves dealing with people. They might be able to lecture on a very specialist subject with care, although I never dared attempt to lecture. I did demonstrations, because I feared that I would never be able to keep a group of students under control. But I did demonstrate, and I found that if students came to me because they didn't understand what their lecturer had said, I could put them right quite quickly and without notes. This is in horticulture, of course. But I wouldn't have had the confidence to stand in front of a class of people to teach them or lecture to them. That's totally different from standing in front of a group of people and giving a talk, because they're all there because they're interested. That I can do, and I have done. But it means you need social skill, which is what Asperger's syndrome boils down to. Your emotional intelligence level is poor. And that's essentially the entire diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome. You can't read people properly. You're so slow at it, it's not instinctive, it's not automatic. You realise, as I said, 5 minutes or 5 years later what you should have done, but by then it's too late.
Those issues and those key points are very valid for people listening to this podcast, and all the actual conversation has been like, in some way, a bit of awareness of what can go wrong in life situations, but not to say too tragic picture on that. However, give a better kind of kit for the individual in understanding the issues, so the individual's better prepared for future scenarios. What the other issue is, you said on the last podcast over advocacy support. Is there any kind of advocacy support may have been in touch, or you may have kind of like ideas on how advocacy should be helping you as an individual out, or other people as individuals out with autism or Asperger's? How could advocacy be better supportive of an individual situation?
Well, there was no advocacy when I started in work. I've never actually experienced it. I don't know how it would work actually. The only one is the way I recommended before, which is possible that there is somewhere where a person with Asperger's syndrome, if they're faced with something which is socially difficult, possibly a difficult situation at a job or something like that, someone independent to whom they could go, explain the situation and get some idea of how to proceed, because they don't have the skills on their own to proceed without help. But I don't know how that sort of advocacy could be given, and it would certainly require somebody extremely skilled to give that advocacy. The other problem is this: somebody who does not have Asperger's syndrome doesn't know what it's like to have Asperger's syndrome, and cannot possibly know what it's like, which would make the advocacy rather difficult, I would think. It's something that needs to be tried out. And I think one way is the people who have reached getting on, they're nearly at the end of their working life, or like me, past the end of their working life, or at least supposed to be past the end of their working life, need to write down their experiences so that other people can read about them and see, that's where he went wrong, that's where she went wrong, that's where the cock-up occurred. Probably not the schooling, it's too far in the past now, and schooling's very different, but job situations and problems with management, problems with the job, being given too much work, given work beyond your capabilities, being put into a situation which requires social skill rather than technical skill when you weren't expecting it. Those things will always occur. That's where you need the advocacy help.
Yeah. What I'll say, like with regard to new technology and kind of new ideas, new innovations, like video conferencing and video tracks on websites, and downloadable documents and downloadable podcasts and portable means of storing sound files. with these type of new future technologies, getting that information out there, what people need to be prepared with, is much more kind of sensible and useful situation compared to how it used to be. So I think with regard to how technology helps the individual and provides for the individual greater compared to how things used to be years ago, it's a better situation for the future.
Well, the only way that would work for me is if somebody was sitting by my side to do it all, because the only way I can explain my experience is either to speak about them, as now, or most simply to write about them, and that in longhand, I'm afraid, because I can't even type properly. But my experiences could certainly be broadcast using all the technology, but I'm not capable of doing it myself. Somebody would have to do it for me who understood the technology better. I mean, I'm pretty useless with technology. I can drive a very old car, but I'm not much use at driving a modern one because I don't know what half the controls mean. I mean, I've been given a digital radio and I cannot get anywhere with it at all, so I'm still on the original one.
Do you have an internet radio or anything like that, internet radio?
No.
Do you know what an internet radio is?
No.
But it's a radio, but it connects to a home Wi-Fi connection, a broadband Wi-Fi connection, or an internet cafe Wi-Fi connection, or any Wi-Fi connection, and it plays back more radio stations than a conventional radio, and there's thousands of radio stations of all different themes and different characteristics. Like there may be one of like classical music, there may be one of like all Elvis tracks, there may be one of like all news programmes, or one about autism. Did you know that there's actually a national UK radio called autismradiouk.co.uk?
No.
Did you know that?
Mind you, such a thing would be very useful if somebody could give me one-to-one tuition in how to manage the thing, because I'm finding that without the one-to-one tuition I'm getting stuck. It's becoming rather like the mathematics at school. Everything else seemed to go in, but alas, the mathematics never did, and it held me back. And this is a problem that I have, and I think it's a problem that all people who are autistic share. They have actual learning difficulties. It doesn't mean that they're thick or they've got a low IQ. They have sheer difficulties in learning certain things, and the reasons are probably quite odd. It may be that one little bit has been left out, and without that they can't proceed to the next step, and I think that's a lot of the problem. That certainly used to happen to me at school, although at the time I didn't realise why. Now I realise that that was and is a problem. If I'm learning something and one step is left out, I can't go around that and carry on and come back to that later on. All the future learning grinds to a halt until somebody has painstakingly explained that step to me. And if it's just in a book or a course and there's nobody there to explain that particular problem that I have, then I can't proceed at all. I think a lot of people with Asperger's syndrome have this problem, although they may not realise it.
What there is like on websites such as Vimeo or YouTube or Dailymotion is various kind of like there may be like documentary tracks, or there may be like instructional tracks, like educational, instructional, information tracks. Like there may be information on setting up an Apache server, or there may be information on internet radio stations. So there basically be a lot of information, instructional information and video tracks to watch on these various websites, which will be better than reading it or better than listening to it.
Well, it's easy enough to read something or listen to something. First of all, get hold of the thing to read or listen to it. And most of my things I tend to acquire in print. That's why the house is full of books. But I must admit that they're very bulky, having the house full of books. And I have to ask somebody else to copy it out or print it out for me quite often, because I just seem to be completely useless at doing so.
The issue with back to the issue of advocacy support. What I noticed is that there's actually an advocacy support for the Tameside area, for quite some sections of society, and they've got a website, and they've actually got like an office in Ashton, and they've got like a phone number, an email address, and they've got like readable information on the website. And I've been in touch with the website tech for the advocacy website and asked them to provide an online form for referrals, and the tech said that they would be prepared to have an online form available on the advocacy website for referrals. So rather than have like a downloadable form for referrals, to write it on a little piece of paper with a pen and then post it back to them, they're going to avoid that in the future possibly via having an online referral form on the website. So all it would be a matter of doing then is just phoning up the individual who needs advocacy, asking them key questions, typing the information on the website referral form, on the online form, and then the information is forwarded there and then. Do you think that's a good idea?
It's a good idea as a first step. I mean, most people, I can manage to find something that's online by going to a thing in the library. But it's all right for a first step. But the second step really needs a face-to-face meeting with the person who's providing the advocacy. Because at a face-to-face meeting you can explain a great deal more than you can over a telephone. Maybe if somebody can manage to set up a video arrangement, that's a reasonable substitute. But there doesn't seem to be a satisfactory substitute for actually meeting someone. Although, if it meant somebody had to travel a very long way, then that's out of the question.
Do you think it's quite a clever kind of idea and quite a clever innovation with regard to what you were saying a few minutes ago about trying to contact advocacy? If the advocacy had like a Skype video link with the individual who needed the support, and then had like a document forwarding system on the website, do you think that would be a technologically faster and better way of doing things?
It's faster, only if they've got the equipment to do it and understand how to use that equipment. But it's only a first step. You need to really feel comfortable and at home if you're asking somebody for help, and that's when you actually need to go in and speak to them face to face, if that's at all possible.
Yeah.
That's the second step. But as a first step, you need to find out where you can have some sort of advocacy service.
So where the individual doesn't have this technology like Skype or document forwarding, sending capability via the website, a traditional kind of seeing the individual in their own home would be a better idea.
Well, in their own home or visiting a place, but it would still be a better idea. Well, it's not a better idea, an additional idea. The website is an initial contact, but you want more than that, or most people would probably need more than that, because there's no substitute for a one-to-one, actually arranging a one-to-one meeting. But first of all, you have to find a helpful advocacy service. And nowadays, that's probably the quickest way of finding an advocacy service, by going to look on a website.
By the internet, yeah.
Yes. But after that, doing it by a video link is about the only way you could over a long distance. And the person may well need assistance to set that up.
Yeah.
They may not also have the equipment to set that up, so they might have to go to some sort of office or service where that could be provided for them.
What the issue there is, it's like a dual system of the individual having traditional means of contacting the individual for support via the advocate support worker, possibly travelling in the vehicle to the individual who needs support, their address, but where the individual has technology at home like Skype or some kind of document forwarding system like scanning documents and sending them to the advocacy support service via the website or even via like an email attachment form. They can make use of that. If they've got that technology at home, they could make use of that as well, possibly.
Or they can make use of that, but one of the places where every form of technology will fail is the interview. You often need advocacy at an interview, and I really don't see how that can be arranged. Because the advocate has to be there present at the interview. And this would render an interview very difficult to do. And also it would make life very difficult for the interviewer as well. But unfortunately, this is where someone with Asperger's syndrome really needs the help. Now you can have, I suppose the only other way would be to try and practice with interviews, but practice interviews are not a lot of use really.
Do you think it will be the same type of situation, having like a video conversation or via Skype or whatever with the advocate support worker as compared to having like a real conversation traditionally with the individual?
I don't quite see what you mean there. It's much the same sort of thing, but it's when you're facing an interview, you're being asked questions. If they're technical questions, then I doubt if somebody with Asperger's syndrome is going to have much of a problem with them. But it's when they start asking other questions which are social or worse at the end of an interview, where you have to ask about yourself, about conditions and situations. And I don't quite see a way around this at all. I mean, I've got into a tangle with jobs not because of the technicalities of the job or even getting the interview. It's been the social setup I found at work once I'd got the job which caused the problem. And then you might have got the problem. Then you need the advocacy service. Then if you have the technology, possibly an online arrangement would work in that condition, that situation, once you've got the job. If you're having problems at work which are of social nature, and I think that's where it would be of most use, because I can't think how it would work in the other situations at all.
That's a great answer. Right, what we'll do now is just conclude the interview and then make the interview, this informative, useful, constructive, positive article, podcast interview available on the net for people to listen to. Anyway, thank you very much, Richard, for the interview, and do wish you all the best for your advocacy, help efforts and support.
Thank you.